Consumer price inflation versus asset price inflation. One of the many ways the elites confuse you, but is beyond important to understand and recognize and realize so you can make the best decisions for you and your family and protect your wealth and grow your wealth, is make no mistake, the elites are coming for all of us. They are constricting and squeezing, like Gregory Mannarino, George Gammon, many out there have done endless amounts of work. We have talked about this for years and how the elites are coming for all of us, trying to choke the middle class out. And that way they have the 1% and everyone else. This is the abolishment of private property, and it is the establishment of just those two classes, the poor and everyone else. And again, the abolishment of private property. And how they confuse you are things like this, confusing you through economic jargon, words, different vocabulary, making things up, gaslighting you, changing definitions. So that way they can stay 10 steps ahead. And the people have no idea what's going on and are beholden to just electing politicians who are going to open the currency spigots for them. And whether it's modern monetary theory or just the current version of the Democrat Party and much of the Republican Party, quite honestly, in the last number of decades. So again, Brandon Gentili here. Probably one of the most confusing aspects of inflation is where it comes from. There are two different main types of inflation that we must differentiate, though, as well. And again, our previous videos and blogs, we've talked about inflation, what it is, how to measure it, how to get around it, how to beat it. Really owning assets, owning physical assets is the biggest thing by far. But here we're talking about the different types of inflation, because the last 10 years, this really tripped me up. After the great financial crisis, we have asset price inflation is when stocks, gold, Bitcoin, silver, housing, all these assets go up in nominal value, lumber, whatever it might be. Consumer price inflation and asset price inflation is what we had for the last 12 years. 10 years, from 08 or 2010 to 2020. And then the last 2 years, 2020 to 2022, we had consumer price inflation. This is the everyday goods and services you are buying at the stores, like groceries, etc. This is what we've had now. And this is really an important differentiator, because this really screwed me up for 10 years after the GFC, because I was waiting for the things to crash again. It was just asset price inflation, the wealth effect, that the elites were pumping themselves up, bailing themselves out, basically. And I didn't understand that. And there's, quite honestly, a lot of people didn't understand it, because there's a lot of people I'm studying who really didn't understand that and didn't. They all thought inflation was coming, another crash was coming, and that's what I thought was going to happen. And it didn't. It just kept blowing this bubble up and increasing the asset prices, the nominal asset prices. People could keep refinancing and pulling debt out, which is tax-free cash, and they can just live off that. That's what that was. So the 10 years, like I said, following the GFC, we mainly had asset price inflation. The last 12 to 18 months, though, we have experienced consumer price inflation, which we really haven't seen since the 70s. And this is the differentiation. So that's why people get confused, because there's demand destruction and supply chain shortages that can help boost asset prices or consumer prices and have inflation. But it's really, true inflation is just an expansion of the currency supply. It can be aided by some other things here, which we'll talk about in a second. But again, the last year to two, we've experienced consumer price inflation because of stimmy payments and exorbitant unemployment and PPP payments, etc. And all the boondoggles, obviously, we've chronicled here and we all know about and have seen in the news. I believe, though, U.S. policy moving forward will most likely have to be inflationary for both asset prices. Again, we'll talk about that in a second. And consumer prices, upward, both are going upward and continually rising because of what they want to do and their stated goals to control the agenda. And unless real libertarian, freedom-minded, liberty-minded people come back into power for really 10, 20, 30 years here in a row, you're going to have this debt bubble, which we have to have. You have to keep blowing this debt bubble higher, else the system collapses. However, there needs to be a collapse. Again, we just had a video recently talking about how the bubble needs to collapse. We need to have a cleansing. We need to have a forest fire, clean everything out, and that way good, better growth can come through. 20% of the Fortune 500 companies, of the S&P 500 are zombie companies. 100 of the 500 S&P 500 companies are zombie companies. They can't afford the interest on their debts, being just bailed out by their buddies on Wall Street, being bailed out by the governments, by the Fed, and it's all one big gang. They're all partying together, all hanging out together. This is the story that's not being told, and this is why people are hurting. This is why people are riding the streets: road rage, social unrest, suicides, pill popping, you name it, discord in families, everything. This stems from the elites bailing themselves out and bailing each other out through the silent tax of inflation and printing currency, the expansion of the currency supply. For the last 6 months, we had an asset price reduction because we're trying to destroy demand, which is just a completely backward way of thinking, but they were trying to destroy demand to bring down prices, which they succeeded a little bit, because they're not going to, we can see that they're still buying stuff in the background. Bonds are still buying assets, the Fed and the central banks all around the world. They're going to continue that, because if $1 doesn't get printed into the system, the whole system collapses and is destroyed. So the period from 2008 to 2020 largely saw asset prices increasing, but consumer prices stayed steady. But again, we have the real M2 money stock here. You can see that asset prices are just going insane, obviously, especially in the last 10 years, 12 years. We had this massive run up in money stock, M2, and then this massive glut of currency come on in 2020. And that's just going to continue. And we have a little dip down here, but it's going to keep going higher. The 10-year treasury is going all over the place. And you can't make this stuff up. We are living in just really unprecedented end time type scenarios. And it makes it very, I from time to time, every couple of weeks, I feel like I'm having a nervous breakdown, because nothing makes sense. Business doesn't make sense. It's very hard to run businesses. 51%, just saw an article, 51% of small businesses say they don't know if they're going to be able to make their next mortgage payment, their next rental payment, their expenses. And there are so many people out there. I mean, all the people you see on YouTube, there's a lot of people that have big YouTube channels, and they're out there, they're getting paid by YouTube. They have, brand appearances, or they're getting speaking engagement money, or whatever it is. And you're seeing a lot of people, they talk about it. And quite honestly, a lot of them, they have small businesses, but a lot of them, they don't really understand what's going on. They aren't on the ground day to day, quite honestly, even though they seem like they are, and they talk like they are, and they look like they are sometimes. They're not on the ground day to day. I mean, again, I love some of these people, and whether it's, I'm not going to name names right now, but there's a lot of people that are very famous in the macro world, and they're great people, but it's hard to understand what's truly going on. You can see stats, you see statistics, and you see the things that are going on, but you don't really get the true picture and see what's going on unless you're living day to day among the plebs. And it's a very, very, the next 6 to 18 months, I think, are going to be really fascinating to see what happens. When you have stimulus payments and transfer payments going to people, that's generally going to increase consumer prices. When you have the Fed buying bonds, mortgage-backed securities, or stocks, the ECB buying unlimited assets, emergency measures in the background, but they claim they want to fight inflation. Just look at the 10-year treasury last 3 months, just going crazy, going all the way up to 3.5%, and now back down to 2.5%. Again, this is going to keep happening. They are trying to suppress rates and artificially prop the markets up again for the millionth time. These purchases generally flow to the banking sector and increase asset prices and speculate in the market. Again, don't fight the Fed. These people are getting bailed out by the Fed. This is going to continue happening. This is why you need to own assets. Bitcoin, gold, silver, housing, whatever it might be, hard assets, oil, that and the real assets. You don't want paper derivatives if you can help it. You want to own and hold the real things. You want Bitcoin in your cold storage. You want gold and silver in your hands. You want to own property. You want these things that are going to hedge with the craziness that's going forward here. The Fed wants to create the wealth effect before the election, because we are such a financialized economy, and make people feel good. Even if there is a little inflation still, they want, if your 401k is up and inflation's up, then it's like, oh, okay, I can deal with it. Long term, again, we'll continue to have higher inflation, and prices will continue to rise, because they want, again, we have to know the lens that they are looking at things through. It's the abolishment of all property right here. The theory of communism may be summed up in a single sentence: the abolishment of private property. Karl Marx. Supply chain disruptions with all the transfer payments directly to people lead to less supply and more demand, meaning way higher prices. So this is, again, really, really, really important to understand. And again, we have Karl Marx telling us this: the goal of Marxism is the abolishment of the middle class. Make no mistake. And this is what the elites, Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum, again, we have to call people out. People don't like confrontation, but we have to call people out. We have to call evil what it is, and that is what it is. Ronald Reagan did it. Talked about the evil empire. The evil empire now is the World Economic Forum. It's the WEF, the WHO, all these entities that think their stuff doesn't stink, and they are smarter than everyone else in the world, and they know it's better for you than you do. That's insanity. And these people need to be stopped, because they are destroying the earth. They're creating famines. They're creating supply chain shortages. We saw Sri Lanka. We saw all these things going on. These people are destroying everything around us, all in the name of you owning nothing, and we'll be happy. And Klaus is going to own everything? Bill Gates is going to own everything? And again, we know this because we have talked about here on this blog about who the elites study and worship. Read The Great Reset. Read The Great Narrative by Klaus Schwab. They want two classes, the 1% and everyone else. So again, Klaus is ready. Come sell your home to the hedge funds that he controls. They are squeezing the middle class like the world depends on it. And believe me, in their eyes, the world does depend on it. We wouldn't have oil leases and plants being shut down if we really wanted abundance and prosperity for all. We even have Europe reclassifying nuclear to make it green. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Nuclear is one of the cleanest things out there. Bitcoin and nuclear energy are the cleanest and the best things for the environment. Yet those are the two things that have been really getting hammered, and now they're reclassifying nuclear because they need it. The elites need it, and they are really painting themselves in a corner. When your economy sounds like and looks like a clown car, it is because it's run by clowns in a clown car. Again, the Great Reset. The goal of WF is you own nothing, and Klaus and his buddies, with help from corrupt business leaders and mainly central bank digital currency, the CBDCs. Elections have consequences all over the world. Your freedoms, your family, your wealth, and your future all lie in the ability of people to do some homework and see where their leaders are taking them. The path is clear. Famine, energy shortage, supply chains breaking, currency manipulations, etc. Your wealth being destroyed, your freedoms, your liberty gone. This is what happens if you continually vote for alphabet soup of government, global, NGOs, government agencies, global agencies, and really, unfortunately, the Democrat Party really has been really overtaken by Marxism, and for a number of decades now. And it is what it is. I don't care about the Republican Party. I don't care about the Democrat Party. It doesn't mean anything to me. Those parties literally mean zero to me. They're just names, and it's just I just care who's in those parties. And generally, Republicans have generally been more freedom based and liberty based. However, there's a lot of them in there that aren't. So you got to be very careful. All these plans have been tried before, and they all ended very badly, with millions upon millions, tens of millions of people dying, namely in the 20th century, because of globalist policy, communist, Marxist policy. We need to learn from our mistake and become resilient, independent, so as to not need the system and not need the politicians to give us things by selling our souls. Stay strong. Again, if you got something out of this, please share, please like and subscribe on the blog here, and please let us know what you didn't like, dislike, and what we can change to get better, provide more value. We thank you for your time, your energy. It's the most important asset we have. And again, we have many other videos. Our last video we did was just on ESG, a little more about Klaus Schwab and how they're using that as a proxy, like we talked about in here, to usurp power from all of us and to really gang up on the rest of the world, bully us and gang up on the rest of us, and to take our power and our property. Property is freedom, liberty, life, liberty, and property. Life, liberty, and happiness, yeah, that is property. And if we don't have sovereignty over our bodies, we don't have sovereignty over our money and our thoughts. We're going to talk more coming soon about Elon Musk and Neuralink in electric cars, and how he could be one of the most evil people on earth, and be used by these people and in bed with them potentially. We just don't know. And playing it like he's a good guy, and they're making him play it like he's a good guy. And when at the end of the day, he really has a technology to kind of enslave humanity if we're not careful. So we're going to talk about that going forward. So look for that potentially this week, and we look forward to seeing you guys on the next one.